For a long time, I thought self-harm only meant things like cutting or doing something extreme, but then I realized I was hurting myself too, every single day, and I didn't even know it. There was no blood, no scars. Just this constant feeling of being drained, hollow, and the same question looping in my head. Why do I feel this bad when everything around me looks fine? And if you've ever asked yourself that, maybe you're like me. Maybe you've been hurting yourself too, not with blades or bruises, but with quiet, invisible habits you've learned to ignore. Today, I want to talk about the kinds of self-harm we don't see, the ones I used to justify, rationalize, hide away, until they started to consume me from the inside out. If you're still here, don't click away. This might be the moment you start to see clearly and begin to heal. And hey, if you're new to Day Psych, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I post every week to help you understand yourself and grow through applied psychology. It didn't start with a breakdown. It started with small things, things I thought were harmless, but over time they added up, and eventually they became the way I was slowly breaking myself without realizing it. The hardest part about invisible self-harm is that it doesn't look like harm. It looks like everyday life, things that seem acceptable, even praised, like skipping lunch because I was too productive. Like answering emails at 2 a.m. and calling it dedication. Like pretending I was okay because I didn't want to bother anyone. But here's what no one saw. I wasn't just skipping meals. I was punishing myself for not being enough. I wasn't just staying up late. I was afraid of silence, of what might come up if I slowed down. I wasn't just being strong. I was emotionally numb and afraid to feel. I remember one night I was so overwhelmed I couldn't even cry. I just sat in the dark, scrolling through my phone for hours, not reading, not watching, just avoiding. Avoiding the voice in my head that kept saying, "You're a failure. You'll never catch up, you don't matter." And the scary part, no one would have guessed. I smiled, I worked hard, I made jokes. From the outside I looked fine, but inside I was exhausted. I wasn't resting, I wasn't healing. I was surviving, barely, and calling it normal. It took me a long time to admit that some of the things I did every day weren't coping strategies. They were coping mechanisms rooted in pain. Habits I picked up not because they were good for me, but because at some point they helped me feel in control, even when everything else felt like chaos. And the more I repeated them, the more invisible the damage became. Because here's the thing about emotional self-harm. You don't bleed, you don't scream, you just quietly fall apart while trying to make everything around you look okay, until one day something breaks, your body gives out. Your mind shuts down, or you wake up and realize, I don't recognize who I've become, and I can't keep living like this. That was my turning point, and maybe this moment right here, listening to this, is yours. I used to think I was just a mess, lazy, unmotivated, out of control. But when I started asking why I did the things I did, I stopped judging myself, and I started understanding myself. When I finally started looking at my habits through a psychological lens, everything shifted. I realized I wasn't lazy. I wasn't undisciplined. I wasn't broken. I was coping with pain that had no place to go. And the ways I was coping, they all made perfect sense until they started hurting me more than helping me. Let's take emotional eating, for example. I used to turn to food every time I felt something I didn't want to feel: sadness, rejection, anxiety. It gave me a quick high, a sense of comfort, like a warm blanket over a cold ache. But psychologically, what I was really doing was numbing. I wasn't allowing myself to process anything. I was pressing pause on pain. And the more I avoided it, the more it grew. Emotional eating is a classic case of displacement, a psychological defense mechanism where you redirect emotional energy into something more acceptable. In my case, chewing was easier than crying. Fullness was easier than facing emptiness. But the body always keeps score. Eventually, the guilt after binging would hit harder than the emotion I was trying to escape in the first place. Then there's the other side, undereating. When I was deeply stressed or overwhelmed, I'd just forget to eat, or I'd tell myself I didn't deserve food. It wasn't conscious, it was survival mode, but in hindsight, it was a form of self-neglect. My nervous system was so activated, so stuck in fight or flight, that basic needs no longer registered. And the worst part, I was praised for it. People said I had discipline, that I was so focused. But I wasn't focused. I was dissociated. I see now that both extremes, binging and skipping meals, weren't about food at all. They were about emotional regulation, and I had none. Then there was workaholism. I used to think working 12 hours a day made me strong, reliable, driven, but really, it just kept me distracted. Constant motion was safer than stillness. Stillness meant I'd have to feel things: grief, loneliness, disappointment. So I buried myself in tasks and called it ambition. But the truth is, chronic overworking is a trauma response. It's called hyperproductivity, and it's one way we try to earn our worth when deep down we don't believe we have any. I wasn't working to build a dream, I was working to avoid myself. The same thing showed up in my relationships. There were times when I said yes to intimacy I didn't want, just to feel wanted. I told myself I was in control, but afterward I felt hollow. I wasn't seeking connection, I was outsourcing validation, and psychologically, that's called self-objectification. When you begin to see yourself the way others see you, rather than how you truly feel inside, it's a painful place to live in, because no matter how much attention you get, it never fills the gap. You just keep handing your body over, hoping someone will give you back your worth. And finally, there was substance use. I wasn't addicted to alcohol itself, I was addicted to not feeling. That numbness, that detachment, it felt like safety. For a little while, it made the anxiety quiet down, but then it always came back louder, because suppression isn't the same as healing. Substances become dangerous not when you use them once, but when you start to rely on them emotionally, when the bottle becomes the therapist, when you stop trusting yourself to handle pain sober. In psychology, this is called maladaptive coping, behaviors that offer short-term relief but cause long-term harm, and every one of my habits fell into that category. They weren't random. They were my nervous system doing the best it could with the tools it had. But the truth is, even if those tools helped me survive, they were never built to help me live, and maybe you feel the same. Maybe you've developed quiet habits that helped you function, but now you're wondering why you're always exhausted, anxious, disconnected. And maybe you're ready to ask the same question I did: what if there's a better way? I didn't need a miracle, I just needed one small moment where I chose care instead of punishment. That's how my healing started, not with some grand breakthrough, but with one tiny decision. To treat myself like I mattered, even when I didn't believe it yet. At first, it felt awkward, unnatural, like I was doing something wrong by being kind to myself. But I kept going because deep down, a part of me was desperate for a different way to live. I began with food, not perfect meals, just one reminder: eat something today that makes you feel nourished, not numb. A smoothie. A warm bowl of rice, fruit, something simple but made with intention. I stopped trying to eat clean or correct and started eating to feel cared for. And when I noticed the urge to binge or skip meals creeping in, I paused. I'd put my hand over my heart and ask, gently, what am I really feeling? Is this hunger or is it grief? Is this craving or is it loneliness? Sometimes I'd write down one sentence: right now I feel, and fill in the blank. No judgment, no trying to fix it, just honesty. That small act of naming how I felt, without numbing, without blaming, was a radical shift. Because for the first time, I wasn't abandoning myself. With overworking, I created one sacred rule: 1 hour a day with no productivity allowed, no checking messages, no self-improvement podcasts, no emails, just 1 hour where I didn't need to earn rest. At first, it made me anxious, like I was falling behind, but slowly that hour became the most valuable part of my day. Sometimes I used it to sit outside, other times I did nothing. And over time, I realized that doing nothing doesn't mean I'm failing. It means I'm finally letting myself exist without condition. I also started practicing micro check-ins, 5-second pauses throughout the day to ask, how's my body feeling? Am I holding my breath? Am I clenching my jaw? Can I soften just a little? These moments didn't solve everything, but they created space, and in that space I stopped spiraling. I started responding instead of reacting. When it came to emotional numbing, whether through alcohol, scrolling, or chaotic choices, I asked myself one question: what would help me feel safe enough to feel right now, not perfect? Just safe enough. Sometimes it was calling a friend. Sometimes it was crying in the shower. Sometimes it was lying in bed with my hand on my chest, whispering, "You're okay, I'm here." Because the truth is, healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about coming back to yourself over and over again. You don't need to do everything at once. You just need to choose one small act of care, and then another, and then another. Until one day, those small acts become your new way of being. That's how it started for me, and maybe that's how it can start for you too. I used to think healing meant becoming someone completely different, someone stronger, wiser, happier, but now I see it differently. Healing, for me, has been about remembering the parts of me I abandoned just to survive. The parts that learned how to cope by disappearing, the parts that never got to feel safe, and slowly, gently inviting those parts back home. Because the truth is, most of the ways I hurt myself weren't because I hated who I was. It's because no one ever taught me how to care for myself without guilt, without fear, without punishment. I didn't wake up one day and decide to stop eating or to overwork myself to the edge of burnout or to numb out with alcohol or distraction. Those things happened because I was in pain and I didn't know what else to do with it. So if you're in that place right now, I get it, and I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to say, you are not broken. You are responding with everything you've got to things that were never supposed to happen to you. You are protecting yourself in the only way you were taught, and that is not failure. That is survival, but survival is not the end of your story. Because now you know more. You know that some of the habits you've called normal might actually be quiet cries for help. You know that self-harm isn't always visible, but it's always valid, and you know that there are other ways to live. Gentler ways, softer ways, more honest ways, and you don't have to get it perfect. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to choose one thing, one place to begin. Maybe it's eating one real meal today. Maybe it's journaling instead of numbing. Maybe it's resting without guilt. Maybe it's just saying out loud, "I'm not okay," and letting that be enough. Whatever that first step looks like, I hope you take it, not for anyone else. Not to prove anything, just for you, because the more you show up for yourself, the less you'll feel the need to disappear. And that is how everything begins to change. So tell me, what's one small act of care you've offered yourself lately? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video spoke to something deep inside you, don't forget to like it and subscribe to High Day Psych. We're building a space here where healing is allowed, where softness is strength, and where you never have to walk this journey alone. You're already doing better than you think, and I'm proud of you just for being here.